I want to start with a parable, actually. And I remember the first time I heard this parable, Laine had it in the beginning of his book called Your Sacred Self. And if you've heard it before, I invite you to listen to it with new ears this morning. As I said, the first time I ever heard it, I was at a Silomar, which is a retreat center in California for the religious scientist history has returned back and back and back to that one place. And I remember sitting there listening to this with my heart just like blowing wide open. So the parable is that in a mother's womb, there were two babies. One asked the other, "Do you believe in life after delivery?" The other replied, "Why, of course, there has to be something after delivery. Maybe we are here to prepare ourselves for what will be later." "Nonsense," said the first. "There is no life after delivery. What kind of a life would that be?" The second said, "I don't know, but there will be more light than here. Maybe we will walk with our legs and eat from our mouths. Maybe we will have other senses that we can't understand now." The first replied, "That is absurd. Walking is impossible, and eating with our mouths ridiculous. The umbilical cord supplies nutrition and everything we need. But the umbilical cord is so short, so life after delivery is to be logically excluded." The second insisted, "Well, I think there is something, and maybe it's different than it is here. Maybe we won't need this physical cord anymore." The first replied, "Nonsense, and moreover, if there is life, then why has no one ever come back from there? Delivery is the end of life, and in the after delivery there is nothing but darkness and silence and oblivion. It takes us nowhere." "Well, I don't know," said the second, "but certainly we will meet Mother, and she will take care of us." The first replied, "Mother? You actually believe in Mother? That's laughable. If Mother exists, then where is she now?" The second said, "She's all around us. We are surrounded by her. We are of her. It is in her that we live. Without her, this world would not and could not exist." Said the first, "Well, I don't see her, so it's only logical that she doesn't exist." To which the second replied, "Sometimes when you're in silence and you focus and you really listen, you can perceive her presence and you can hear her loving voice calling down to you." That is the parable. And I just love that parable, and it's perfect for Mother's Day. And I love the image of these two beings, being in such a dark place, yet surrounded by pure life, pure energy, everything they need. And it's such a beautiful image to me. And there is something profoundly human that one of them has faith in that darkness, what is beyond the darkness, and the other is resisting anything that is beyond the senses of the ego. And I think on any given day of darkness, all of us could assume either of those positions, right? And in this month when we're focusing on the light in the shadows, I want to explore the idea that we need both the light and the darkness in our experiences for our betterment. So have you ever felt like you were trapped in a dark place? Not a dark place physically like the babies were in, but a dark place like the first twin was in, that dark place of doubt and faithlessness and fear of the future, fear of the unknown. A dark place where no matter what someone else may believe or find hopeful, you just couldn't see the possibilities for yourself. Please tell me I'm not the only one that's been in that situation, right? A dark place where emotions are so thick and there seems to be no end to it, no light to be found. We've probably all felt like we were in that place before at some point in our lives. The experience is actually universal. It's why there are parables like this to be shared, because it's so universal, and there's a spiritual purpose for us in it as well. And actually some of you might feel like you're in that place right now, so I want to talk about that. We find ourselves in a dark place, and when we do, it's normal to drop into fear. It's normal, but is it necessary? Is fear our final choice or a choice along the path, which we can kind of phase through and path to something better? And what is the fear really about? Heather's reading kind of spoke to this a little bit. When we're in a dark place, we're grappling with the unknown. The unknown. Like the first twin, we just can't see a way out. We can't see what's next. We don't know what's going on. And that can be very scary and paralyzing. And so many things can bring us to that kind of a dark place. But most of the time, we find ourselves in a dark place because of a change, or things that are out of control. So much is happening right now in the world around us that can steer us into dark thoughts and dark places. Gun violence and political smashing and bashing and environmental stuff and economics. There's so many things that can kind of get us off track. And how do we cope? And then sometimes it's actually something in our personal lives that has us in that dark place. And I'm not immune. I'm not immune to these dark places either. As many of you witnessed, a few years ago, I found myself in a place of great unknown, a place of darkness, actually. I was recently divorced and I was living alone for the first time in 30 years. I had not lived by myself. And it was also the beginning of the pandemic, which kind of made all of us feel a bit more isolated. And during that time, I could talk to friends or even other ministers, and all of them could speak of faith in the future, faith in the process I was going through, but I kind of felt just lost in it. I kind of felt like that doubtful twin, like, I don't know, I don't see anything beyond this. I had absolutely no idea how to find my way to a better place, but I started trying everything that I had learned over the years, over the course of my life. Parker Palmer, he's a Christian pastor, and he also writes a lot. And he captured how grateful I was for those people I could talk to during that time. He wrote this: when I went into the darkness of depression, I took comfort and strength from those who neither fled from me nor tried to save me, but were simply present to me. Their willingness to be present revealed their faith that I had the inner resources to make this treacherous trek. So I'm thankful for those people who stood around me during that time and knew that I could make it. Some of you were present to me during that time. So I want to share some of the wisdom that I picked up, some of the things that I learned in that dark period. And if you write them down, I'm going to give you 4 things that I learned. The next time you find yourself there, or perhaps overwhelmed or profoundly uncertain, maybe these things might help you. The first one is this: when we are experiencing the shadows of life, let us remember we are never alone. We're never, ever alone. We may not have a twin beside us like the babies in the womb, but Spirit is everywhere present. And Spirit can show up as that friend who is willing to sit with us and for us, that has faith in us. But it can also show up. Spirit can show up as a song. It can show up as a meme on social media, a post. It can show up as a bird or another wild animal or a beloved pet. Spirit can show up as an idea or a thought, or it can show up as a wave of grace or hope. Drop into prayer and begin to look for evidence that Spirit is with you. And if you can find evidence of Spirit, drop into gratitude. But if you can't find evidence, find someone who can help you. A practitioner, a minister, someone. You're never alone. And I did all of those things. I remember filling my apartment with music day and night. Just inviting Spirit to live in those sounds around me and change the vibration. I looked for spiritual wisdom in everything that I read. books, online, whatever I was reading, I was looking for evidence. I saved memes in my photos. I have still they're in my photo thing on my phone, so I could read them later, things that were encouraging to me. You know, I lived in an apartment, there was a pond right outside, and I cherished when Spirit would show up as all the different pieces of wildlife, the turtles and the frogs and the birds and all of the different animals. And I got a pet at that time too. I invited Spirit to be on that journey with me. I felt like I was courting the Spirit in any way I could find it. The second piece of wisdom, I remembered that creativity, the early stages of it, happen in the dark, always occur in darkness and solitude. Think about it. Seeds are planted into the dark ground, for them to begin their first part of becoming what they are going to become next. Artists often go into solitude, sometimes in the middle of the night, to create music or to write or to think, to create whatever they're inspired to create. Often that occurs alone at night. So much inspiration happens in the dark. In the darkness of the womb, it is there that a new life begins. So if you sense you're in a dark place, ask yourself, what is being called forth from you? If your road has led you to this place, perhaps it's time for a new direction. Is there something wanting to be birthed in your life in this experience? You know, during my time of living alone, grappling with all the emotional turmoil that I was in, I wrote almost every day. My faith told me I wasn't going to be in this position for long, so I should take advantage of it while I was there, right? I needed to make the most out of it, stretch into the space and get creative if I could. I dreamed of a new life. I planted seeds of intentions, and I imagined the path that would get me there. I created Zoom and FaceTime sessions with my friends that lived afar so that I kept that creative connections going. All of these things kind of helped me, right? The third piece of wisdom is drop into gratitude. Drop into gratitude. Look around you right where you are, even in your dark shadow place, and appreciate the little things that are sustaining you. That chair you're sitting in, the cup of coffee in your hand, the beat of your heart, the star in the sky, whatever it is, all of those things are showing up there as your gifts. And appreciate how they sit with you in the dark and accompany you on your journey. It's impossible to feel fear when you're feeling gratitude. So anchor in this practice. And my gratitude journal is my most faithful spiritual practice, actually. Sometimes I felt like I was really stretching myself to find things to be grateful for at that time, but it was such an important part of my day. And if I could identify something that would give me joy, spark some joy, I would purposefully seek it out. Seeking gratitude became like a new level of this for me. And the fourth thing I will tell you is find the light switch. Eric Butterworth said, no matter how dark a situation may appear, you always have a choice of turning on the light. And as someone once said, it's much better to bring the light than to curse the darkness. You always have the option of turning on more light. Isn't that great news that there's always more light and more and more and more light? Light is always available to you as a spiritual being. Light is always available. Look for it until you find it. If you're in physical darkness, maybe it's the star in the sky or the moon or the faintest light of dawn on the horizon, or for that matter, a literal light switch. If you're in a more subtle kind of darkness, maybe you find light in a memory. Maybe it takes playing some of your favorite music, as I said. Maybe it's a phone call to a friend. Maybe it's found in just moving your body. You're going to find the light, but it's going to be a choice on your part, an action on your part. But when you decide to move toward the light, the universe will meet you in that direction. Darkness has no power to exist in the presence of light. In the presence of sunshine, night disappears. It's a law. So for me, the light switch that I reached for was this teaching. I returned to some of the basic books that I found inspiring when I first came into spirituality. I reread this thing called You by Ernest Holmes. Great book to read at that time. I also found a copy of The Power of Decision. Dove into that one too. You know, I knew in the presence of truth, everything false would kind of shrink. Holmes said this: sitting in the shadow, we may not really believe that there is any sunshine, but the sun would be there all the time. It is there, but we must awaken to it. So those are some things about how to deal with the immediate feeling of darkness, but is there a way for us to spiritually release our fear of the dark and instead embrace the dark as an important part of living? You know, wouldn't it be smart to prepare for another experience of the shadow, knowing that it's going to be a part of life's journey? I was looking for some wisdom on that, and I found this book by Barbara Brown Taylor, and she wrote a book called Learning to Walk in the Dark. Interesting read. And in that book, she explores the underappreciated value of darkness. She wrote this: I have learned things in the dark that I could never have learned in the light. Things that have saved my life over and over again, so that there is really only one logical conclusion. I need darkness as much as I need light. Wow. I don't think in the middle of a dark place I could have come to that conclusion. But you know, when I look back over my whole life, and I invite you to do the same, if you look back over your whole life, you'll realize you learned things in dark periods of your life that you could have never learned in the bright sunshine of happiness and joy, right? When things weren't easy, I was rising to higher levels of consciousness and living. Maybe I had a belief that darkness was the absence of God. But what if instead it was pointing me to a greater experience of God in my life? What if there is a lesson in the experience of darkness and light, and that is to remember that it is always waxing and waning, kind of like the moon, like the phases of the moon. Light gradually fades into darkness, and darkness gives way to the light again. And if we knew that darkness was always going to pass, would we have greater faith and simply experience it with ease? Back in that same book, Taylor talks about going out onto her porch and watching the moon, always looking for the moon, and noticing that every time she walked out, it would be different. You know, sometimes it would be a big orb in the sky, and sometimes it'd be a little sliver. Sometimes the clouds partly hit it, and all of those things. The moon, she said, is a better symbol of the light in her heart than the sun is, because the sun looks the same every day. It's just bright, and the moon reminds her that this too shall pass. This too shall pass. Taylor goes on to write, to be human is to live by sunlight and moonlight, with anxiety and delight, admitting limits and transcending them, falling down and rising up. To want a life with only half of these things in it is to want half a life, shutting the other half away where it will not interfere with one's bright fantasies of the way things ought to be. I don't want half a life. I don't think you do either, right? Things are the way they are, and having the faith to embrace all of it is actually living life instead of ignoring anything that doesn't fit our idea of perfection. And another lesson we can learn is darkness is essential to the human experience. It is essential. We have this tendency to have this kind of low tolerance for sadness, or we believe that we should be happy all the time. And if you aren't happy all the time, then there's something wrong with you. And that's just bonkers. It's bonkers, right? We're giving this full range of emotions, and there's a time for all of them to have their expression and the experience. All of our emotions are tools that guide us. Perhaps there's one more lesson, and that is that darkness is required for us to appreciate light. Our eyes are trained to see light, no matter how small. I was reading that your eyes can notice a candlelight more than 5 miles away in the dark. We are trained to see it, but we have to open our eyes and look for it, right? If there is a light to be found, we'll find it, but we have to be looking for it. The bottom line is that darkness can be our friend. It can be a space of fertility and creativity. It can soothe and comfort us, and it can yield insight and clarity. We can surrender to the darkness and experience vulnerability, but we've got to learn to embrace it, feel more comfortable in it, and welcome it into our experience. The Divine Mother, the divine feminine within all of us, embodies fertility and creativity in the darkness. It gives birth from the darkness. The Divine Mother points us toward the light always. I would like to end today's talk by sharing a poem by Amy Love, and it will serve as a closing prayer as well on the subject of light and dark, and it also returns us to the beginning of the talk in the parable there about birth on this Mother's Day. And Amy Love tapped into her inner Dr. Seuss, so I will read it in the way that I used to read Dr. Seuss and some of my favorite mothering moments with Kelsey. So welcome to story time. They're all waiting for you. There's no time for delay. Are you ready to go? Urged a voice far away. Go where? Who am I? Came to my puzzled reply. The voice spoke again, but this time from inside. You are destined for Earth. It comes from the stuff I use to make you, even when things get rough. Remember that you are already divine. To find who you are, just let your light shine. For you always existed and always will be. I know because, well, I am you. You are me. But what kind of a light am I supposed to be? I begged the voice, who then giggled with glee. You can be the matchstick that brightens a cake, all covered in sprinkles, like memories make. Or maybe the flood lamp in rafters above, guiding fly balls to some lucky kid's glove. They always need fireflies to flicker real bright, to help them find love in the darkness of night. But the world needs your spark, or else it will stay dark. Now, don't get me wrong, the dark ain't always bad. There'll always be times it is welcomed, like when you feel sad. The dark ain't all bad, you need it to get rest. But some days it'll stay, make it hard to get dressed. When it stays dark, you might find you can't see the entire forest, let alone just a tree. But I promise you this, those trees naked and bare, outside in the winter, inside are still there. You've got the power to choose your display of light in this world, how you'll show up today. Create puppet shadows, make shade under trees, or perhaps be a laser that does surgery. I made you from myself, since that's all I can do, and I can't wait to just see how you will be you. What if I forget or fall flat in the dirt? I whispered my fears. Is it going to hurt? I could hear the voice smile as I started to move toward the light, worried how I would prove. You're about to be born, but you've never not been. If you get to the end, we'll begin once again. For after the dark, the light always must shine. Doubt if you must, but it's all my design. And when the day comes when you've no more energy, I'll call you back home and you'll return to me. Amy Love. Go be the light, even in the dark. And so it is.
So it is.